We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? We give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah. My question is to the Prime Minister. Australian taxpayers will pay $77 billion extra because of Labor's toxic taxes. Prime Minister, why did your government vote against lower income taxes 11 times, including the Coalition's plan for bigger and better income tax cuts year after year after year?
Order. Order. Members on my right. Member for Spence. Prime Minister has the call.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'm actually asked about the Coalition's tax policy. And I welcome that opportunity.
Order.
Because on the 1st of July, every Australian worker will receive a tax cut this year. On the 1st of July next year, every Australian will receive another tax cut. Both of those tax cuts were voted against by those opposite. And they said if they were elected and he was the Treasurer, then they would reverse it. And today, of course, we've seen that error repeated. We saw them vote against the working Australian tax offset of $250 for every Australian worker, and we saw them vote against the tax cut that's also reformed, the $1,000 automatic tax deduction. But it shouldn't be surprising, given the history which is there.
Order.
Because we know that
rejecting.
The costings that the Coalition released when the member for Hume was the Shadow Treasurer just 2 days before the last election.
The Prime Minister will pause. The member for Forrest will leave the chamber under 94A. We're just going to set the scene. Order. And members on my right aren't helping the situation. The members for Bennelong, the members for Spence are on thin warnings as well. You may sit a long way from me, but I can hear every word you're saying. So can everyone just take a breath? The Leader of the Opposition was entitled to ask his question. I'm going to listen to the Prime Minister to make sure he's been directly relevant and show him some respect.
Speaker. The Coalition went to the last election arguing for $75 billion in higher personal income taxes. They've argued for $14 billion of higher taxes on the resources and manufacturing sectors by abolishing production tax credits, higher taxes on motorists by abolishing the EV concession, higher taxes on the housing construction industry by abolishing Build to Rent, abolishing Help to Buy, abolishing the Housing Australia Future Fund, bigger mortgages, of course, by abolishing Help to Buy. You asked about your policies.
The Prime Minister will pause. The Leader of the Opposition on point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. The question was about the government voting against lower income taxes 11 times today.
Yeah, this was opened a little bit different, and when you said I know the question, but there was an element in there about the opposition's policy. That was order. The Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations can sit there and listen to this answer. So if you're going to ask about why didn't you support the Coalition's policy, the Prime Minister is going to be, assuming, going to give answers as to why he disagrees or agrees with that. So I'll listen to him carefully, but he has the call.
Certainly, it's not surprising that they actually don't want to talk about what their agenda has been. They voted for and support higher power bills by abolishing the Cheaper Home Batteries program. They want more expensive TAFE courses by abolishing free TAFE. And today, of course, they voted against the legislated 5 rounds of income tax cuts that were put forward. No wonder they brought Tony Abbott back to run the Liberal Party, Mr Speaker. A bloke who was dumped by his own party, then dumped by his own electorate, and they've made him party president. At least when they resurrected the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, they chose a species that had been successful.
Order. Order. Members on my right. Order. The member for Canning. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Menzies.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering real, lasting cost of living relief for Australians while helping with the aspiration of home ownership? What other approaches is the government being asked to consider?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Menzies for his question. Not something I thought I'd ever have to say in this House, I've got to say. But today, every Labor member in this House voted to deliver another 2 income tax cuts. $250 for every worker, plus $1,000 automatic tax deduction, making sure that there's reform there as well. Every Labor member voted for aspiration for all, not just for some. And we did that by making sure that Australians can have a crack at owning their first home. Every Labor member voted for Australians to earn more and to keep more of what they earn, which is why on Monday we welcomed the fact that the poorest paid, those people on the minimum wage, the people who clean our offices here in Parliament House, the people who do that hard yakka, going to work each and every day to make a difference for their family, could get a decent pay increase. Those opposite never supported that. Every Labor member today voted to deliver an economy that works for people, not the other way around, not people just working for an economy. Every Labor member voted to deliver real change, the real change that Australia needs, and every single member of the 3 right-wing parties, the Liberal One National Party, voted against these changes. They voted against cutting income taxes. They voted against a future with intergenerational equity at its heart. They voted to keep a housing system that everyone knows is broken. But they want to get further. Because if they get the chance, they'll increase income taxes for every single Australian worker. They promised at the last election higher debt, bigger deficits and higher taxes, and they promised to re-break the system. They promised to go back to a housing system that simply is not working. Well, we on this side of the House stand for aspiration and we stand for opportunity. Labor stands for opportunity and the fair go. We're delivering real change, and today's legislation did just that.
Call to the honourable member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Today, the Albanese Labor government voted 11 times against lower taxes. By voting against the Coalition's tax-back guarantee, Labor is locking in higher taxes for Australian workers year after year. Will the Prime Minister be upfront with Australians and admit his government voted to steal hundreds of billions of dollars in extra taxes from hard-working Australians?
Yeah. Got some problems with this one, but we'll hear from the Leader of the House.
Yeah, there's clear unparliamentary language towards the end of that question, Speaker.
So we'll just withdraw that part of the question.
Withdraw, take without election mandate.
All right. We got there in the end. Order. The member for Cornwall will leave the chamber under 94A. That is highly disorderly. Well, I don't care whose birthday it is. And the member for Bruce can put down his hand. Order. And the House comes to order. The member for Bruce will leave the chamber under... Honestly. Honestly. When the House comes to order, I mean it. Prime Minister has the call. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. One thing you'll say about the Shadow Treasurer, he never lets facts get in the way. Today, we just passed legislation through the House of Representatives to lower taxes. That is what we just did.
Order.
And those
Order.
opposite voted against it. Voted against it. We clearly, on top of the tax cuts that, to be fair to the member for Goldstein, he didn't vote against because he wasn't here. He didn't vote against it last time, but all the rest of them did. They voted against the tax cuts that will come in on July 1. They voted against the tax cuts that will come in on July 1 next year. But today they voted against tax cuts, the Working Australians tax offset, and they voted against the $1,000 automatic tax deduction. Yeah, it takes some capacity to actually go to an election arguing for higher taxes but at the same time delivering higher deficits, but that's what this bloke did at the last election.
Order. And the House comes to order. Order. Members on my left, the member for right. The House comes to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Bullwinkle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How will the Albanese Labor government's tax cuts help workers, and how will the government's tax reforms help first home buyers and home buyers? And how does this compare with other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Big thanks to the member for Bullwinkle for her great question and also for voting for tax cuts today, including for many of Australia's nurses, and the member for Bullwinkle was a nurse herself, Mr. Speaker. This government and this week is all about higher wages and lower taxes for workers and a fair go for first home buyers, Mr. Speaker. And the legislation that we passed through the House today will cut taxes for more than 13 million Australian workers. It will make tax time simpler for Australia's workers, and it will help more first home buyers into housing. Now, our tax reforms are the most significant in over a quarter of a century. They will help tens of thousands of Australians into homes, and these are the Australians who would have been otherwise locked out of housing if those opposite had their way, who will now be able to find and buy a home of their own thanks to the legislation proudly supported by this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. And the Working Australians tax offset is the most meaningful permanent increase to the effective tax-free threshold since Labor last increased it more than a decade ago. As I said, more than 13 million Australian workers will benefit. And we're funding these tax cuts for workers through our reforms to make Australia's tax system fairer, and that's why the four elements were presented in one bill today, Mr. Speaker. Because of this government, the average worker will be better off up to $2,816 a year. If those opposite had their way, every one of those workers would be paying higher taxes, Mr. Speaker. Today was a very big test for the coalition, and they failed it once again, Mr. Speaker. One of the reasons why there are fewer of them over there this term of the parliament than they were in the last term of the parliament, because in the last term of the parliament they listened to the member for Hume when he told them all to vote against tax cuts. And today they have repeated the same mistake once again. They have voted against tax cuts before, and today they have voted against tax cuts once again. Well, this side of the House is proud to support the working people of this country. Those opposite voted against them. We are proud to support first home buyers in this country. Those opposite voted against them. We take our intergenerational responsibilities to young people seriously, even if those opposite do not, Mr. Speaker. This side of the House doesn't just acknowledge that there are issues in the housing market and in the tax system, but we're prepared to take difficult decisions to actually address those challenges, not just try and benefit from it politically like the three right-wing parties do, Mr. Speaker. Labor is delivering tax cuts. We're helping first home buyers into homes. Those opposite voted for higher taxes, and to lock tens of thousands of Australians out of the housing market, and that's what the vote earlier today was all about.
Before I call the member for Bradfield, I'd just like to do a few acknowledgements, if I may. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is Mr John Haslam, the former member for Canberra and current president of the Association of Former Members of the Parliament of Australia. And also I'd like to welcome from representatives from World Vision, Simon Main and Lillian Dodzo, who are in Canberra this week to brief representatives on the Sudan crisis now entering its third devastating year. Welcome to Question Time. Give a call to the honourable member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. The government handed out $622 million in diesel tax credits to BHP last financial year, and BHP's after-tax profits were over $15.5 billion. Can you explain to Australians why one of Australia's most profitable companies needs a $622 million taxpayer subsidy for diesel use, especially in the middle of a fuel crisis when regular Aussies are feeling the crunch at the bowser?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question. The government's focus has been on securing fuel supply in the middle of a fuel crisis internationally, Mr Speaker, will be the first point I'd make. Secondly, the point I'd make is that the government has chosen to focus reducing emissions in heavy industry, including mining, through reforms to the safeguard mechanism, which have now been operating for 2 years and have resulted in 5.8 million tonnes of avoided emissions. And importantly, Mr Speaker, are projected to avoid 17 billion litres of diesel being used between now and 2035, because we are putting in place the settings which will encourage those big emitters and big facilities to reduce their fuel use in a careful, methodical and properly designed fashion.
Give a call to the honourable member for Dixon.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. How is the Albanese Labor government progressing with its commitments to deliver 55,000 new social and affordable homes? Why is this approach better for Australians than other approaches?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thanks so much, Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Dixon for her question. And I know I speak for all of my Labor colleagues when I say how privileged we are to work with her. Speaker, the housing debate in the parliament in recent weeks has been focused on the tax changes that passed the lower house just earlier. Speaker, we've got a broken housing system in this country, and today our Labor government stood up and we did something big about this, Speaker. Our law, for the first time, puts first home buyers on a level playing field. It'll help 75,000 Australians get out of renting and into a home of their own. And don't forget, Speaker, a tax cut for every single one of Australia's 13 million workers. But of course, Speaker, the changes that were in the bill before the parliament this morning are part of a much more huge, ambitious and nation-shaping plan for housing, our Homes for Australia plan. Now, Speaker, this was a plan that we started in 2022 when our government was elected. We've built on it each budget and each election, and we're going to continue to do that. Now, Speaker, social and affordable housing sits right at the heart of our agenda. For Australians who are escaping family violence, for older women who are at risk of homelessness, for families who are doing it tough, a safe home changes their life. It changes everything. Speaker, our goal is 55,000 homes. We've completed more than 7,000. We've got 23,000 today in planning or construction. And I wanted to give the parliament a little bit of a flavour of some of the things that have happened on this front just in the last 6 weeks. The member for Petrie and Senator Mulholland kicked off construction on 36 new homes in Deception Bay. 28 new homes started construction in the member for Parramatta's electorate. The member for Hasluck kicked off construction of 56 new homes in her electorate. The member for Canberra kicked off construction of 55 new homes in her electorate. The member for Swan kicked off construction on 15 new homes in Victoria Park. And just this morning, the member for Bean and I kicked off construction on 140 homes this morning.
The Minister will pause. Order. The member for Maranoa and Casey continually just saying the same thing over and over and over again is highly disorderly, and it's annoying. So if you could just, for the remainder of this answer And if you say one more thing during this answer, you will have to leave the chamber, because it is not fair on the minister. It's not fair on the rest of the chamber for that behaviour to continue. So, everyone, there's consequences for actions. Just ask the minister to return to the question.
Thank you so much, Speaker. And I am getting a little bit of back chat, as I often do when I start talking about social and affordable housing. If you've been adding up the numbers as I go there, Speaker, you might have noticed that in the last 6 weeks alone, our government started construction on more social and affordable homes than the Coalition built in a decade. More than in a decade, Speaker. Now, I'm asked about alternatives. Well, we saw it. It was 9 years of neglect, 9 years on sitting on these government benches, seeing Australians in pain on housing and choosing to do absolutely nothing about it. Now, Speaker, we can't forget the Nationals in here. I don't like to leave them out of the debate, and I want the parliament to remember that in the entire 9 years the Coalition were in government, they built not a single social and affordable home across the entirety of regional and rural Australia, Speaker. Now, those opposite occasionally talk about housing. Our Labor government is standing up and building it, Speaker, and despite those opposite, we're going to keep working for Australians.
The call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the House of Representatives.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. On the 26th of May, the Prime Minister said, quote, "We are also changing the capital gains tax regime to go back to 1999." End quote. Today, Senate estimates, Treasury Secretary Wilkinson rejected the Prime Minister's assertion by confirming a minimum 30% tax rate was not part of the pre-1999 system. Will the Prime Minister correct Hansard and admit his assault on hard-working Australians is much more punitive than the pre-1999 system?
Order. Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Canning for his question. I also thank him for his support. Because on the 23rd of March, he said this: "I want to fight for my generation and the generations below. They see the housing market particularly as rigged against them. So there's a policy debate to be had, but the politics has already bolted. Young Australian..." Just listen to him. Listen to him behind you. Listen to him behind you.
You'll be working for him soon. You better listen up.
Order. Order. The member for Canning on a point of order.
Thanks, Speaker. It was a forensic question. I ask that you bring back the Prime Minister. And while we're at it, can I please table Hansard from the 26th of May and today?
No. Yeah. Order. Resume your seat. That's fine. Resume your seat. Hansard is available, but order. No, people are entitled to table anything. The Prime Minister was talking about the person that had asked him the question, so he won't be able to do that for the remainder of the question, but he's 40 seconds in.
Speaker, yes, I'm speaking about the member for Canning and what he said about capital gains and negative gearing changes. That is what he said. He said this: young Australians want to tear down the system because it doesn't work for them. And if we're not responsive to that as a party, we may as well become extinct. Perhaps that explains the return of the great dinosaur, Tony Abbott. Perhaps there's a link there, Mr Speaker.
Why would you give him that question?
Order. The member for Canning. The manager. We've already had one point of order on relevance.
I just want to help you, Speaker. The Prime Minister is defying your ruling.
Yeah, and as I said to the Prime Minister, he won't be able to continue on with that. I think he'll move. I'll ask him to move on from the member for Canning. He's asked that question. Order. Can everyone just show some self-control? Okay, the Prime Minister will just continue and be directly relevant.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I'm talking about capital gains. I'm talking about the view, not just held by me and those on this side, but held helpfully by the member for Canning, that the system is broken and that there needed to be change. And what we've moved from is a discount of 50% to the discount system that was in place prior to 1999, which was a discount system based upon real gains. That was what was in place. That is the fundamental difference between the two distinctions. And you know, he yabbers away, Mr. Speaker, non-stop. What he should do,
the leader of the opposition,
what he should do, even if he won't listen to people on this side of the House, he can listen to the people behind him, because soon enough you might have to.
Order. When ask the leader of the opposition just to take a break, so I can hear from the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring that young people in regional communities can get into the housing market and own a home of their own? And what's standing in the way?
Give a call to the Minister for Infrastructure, the Minister for Transport, the member for Moncrieff. I've made pretty clear about interjecting while I'm calling a minister. I'm just going to warn you and make sure there's no more interjections. So I'll call the minister again, but that's not respectful or the way this House should work, in my opinion. Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the member for Richmond for her question? Like many of us who live in regional areas, her community in the New South Wales North Coast and mine in Western Victoria are feeling the effects of a broken housing system. As housing has got more expensive in the capital cities, many city investors have looked to the regions for investment. Now, we welcome that investment, but as a result, young people trying to buy their first home are being pushed into the back of the queue in our regional areas. Young people that want to stay in their hometowns of Ballina or Ballarat but found that they could no longer afford to do so. Since coming into government, we have been working hard to fix this. Already under the 5% deposit scheme introduced by this government, more than 250,000 Australians have bought their own home. 250,000 Australians. That includes 1,600 in my own hometown of Ballarat. Through our new $2 billion local infrastructure fund introduced in this budget, will support local councils to unlock much-needed housing development. This fund will be open to local government and state utility companies to apply for and will build the critical last-mile infrastructure like water, power and sewage needed to support housing developments. We've upskilling regional Australians through free TAFE, and Today we have taken that next step to reform our tax system and make it easier to get first home buyers into the housing market. The legislation that has just passed this House will help more than 75,000 Australians into their first home. The problem we face in the housing market is that in the cities and in the regions has been decades in the making. For too long, first home buyers have had a housing system stacked against them. And on this side, we are making those vital investments and introducing important reforms to get young people in the cities and particularly in our regions into homes. And we are already seeing that change. A home in North Ballarat a couple of weekends ago sold to a first home buyer in his early 30s, and every other single registered bidder at that auction was an owner-occupier, and that has not been happening in our regions for a long, long time. This was one of the first homes under the hammer since we announced these reforms, and already the difference is noticeable at auctions in our regions. But over there, they call these changes absolutely a gimmick. There's a reason they didn't have a housing minister when they were in government. There's a reason that they did not back these reforms and voted against them, because fundamentally they believe we should just leave things as they are, that everything is going perfectly okay and that we should make no changes at all, help no young people, let the problem just rot and get worse. The Grand Coalition of Inaction would only deepen Australia's housing crisis, particularly for young people in our regions.
Call to the honourable member for Cowper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Experts are warning that the government's broken promises will give the Treasurer sweeping extraordinary powers, including the power to scrap the tax offset. After repeatedly assuring Australians these tax changes were not on the table, why would small businesses and farming families trust the Treasurer with sweeping extraordinary powers?
Give a call to the Treasurer.
If the honourable member knew anything about tax legislation, he would know that these are not extraordinary powers. And
Order.
The legislative instruments that are used to determine definitions in the tax system are disallowable by the parliament, Mr Speaker, in the usual way. And I don't remember hearing any of this from any of those opposite when governments of the opposite political persuasion had exactly the same kind of system, Mr Speaker. Now, if any of those opposite knew anything about tax legislation, they would know that big tax reform is done in tranches of legislation and that the definitions are settled in legislative instruments which can be disallowed by the parliament.
Order.
Now, the problem that the member opposite asking the question has is just because you can get someone to write this rubbish doesn't make it true, Mr Speaker. It doesn't make it true. There is nothing extraordinary about treasurers of either political persuasion settling definitions in this manner, and I've finished my answer, Mr Speaker.
All right, we'll just get the manager to resume his seat. Order. Okay. Now the House is settled. We'll hear from the honourable member for Braddon.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestries. What actions is the Albanese Labor government taking to strengthen our biosecurity system and get more fertiliser to our farms? What has been the response to these measures?
Call to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and I do want to thank our fabulous member for Braddon. It's been a real privilege to be up in her electorate with her and talking to farmers and, of course, taste some of Australia's best produce in her electorate too, Mr Speaker. And, of course, we are supporting our farmers because we understand the importance of keeping our farmers farming during this difficult time for them, Mr Speaker. Just yesterday, I was pleased to advise that more than 1 million tonnes of imported urea has now been cleared through Australia's strict biosecurity system since the escalation of the war in the Middle East in February. 1 million tonnes, Mr Speaker, cleared through our biosecurity system that, let's not forget, those on the other side left underfunded when they left office. A system now that we've had to strengthen with over $2 billion in additional funding. And while our government will never compromise on biosecurity, we have introduced a streamlined process to get our fertiliser to our farmers faster. Order. This has been welcomed by Fertiliser Australia, where their Chief Executive, Stephen Annals, saying they're committed to working alongside the government, ensuring that our collaborative efforts lead to sound biosecurity systems and timely access to fertiliser for Australian farmers, Mr Speaker. And as I've said many times, we do have enough fertiliser in the country or on the water in terms of the current planting season. But we are adding to this. We want to provide as much certainty in uncertain times for our farmers as we possibly can. And we've now secured 6 cargoes of around 209,000 tonnes of additional urea through our $7.5 billion fuel and fertiliser security facility. With our work to underwrite this fertiliser being called for and welcomed by the industry, with the National Farmers Federation saying they're pleased to hear more fertiliser is on its way to Australian farmers and that every bit counts, Mr Speaker. But, of course, we haven't had any clarity from those on the other side, Mr Speaker. The 3 parties over there of opposition have been saying, on one hand, they're welcoming the fact that we're getting more fertiliser. Some of them are saying we're not getting enough. Some of them are saying we shouldn't interfere in the market, Mr Speaker. They can't make up their mind whether getting more fertiliser for our farmers is a good thing or not. Well, we make no apologies for getting more fertiliser into Australia for our farmers.
Order.
We want to make sure that our farmers have access—
Just get the minister to pause. I'll just hear quickly from the
Just
manager.
on relevant, Speaker, this is a critically important issue for a lot of people, and it didn't talk about the opposition.
Yeah. Who's the Minister for Social Services is warned. The minister was talking about alternative policies, but I'll hear from the Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, the minister was specifically asked what has been the response to these measures, and that's what she's directing to now.
Okay. Just make sure her answer doesn't consist of opposition policy, and make sure the manager is listening alongside me. But the minister, in continuation to the question.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I think my point is they don't have a policy or a view that's coherent. They can't decide whether enough fertiliser for our farmers is a good thing or not. But we make no apologies for getting more fertiliser for our farmers or more fuel for our farmers. We're going to continue that hard work with our international trading partners, with Fertiliser Australia and with our farmers to make sure that we can do everything that we can do to get as much fertiliser into this country as we possibly can, clearing 1 million tonnes of fertiliser since the war, and will continue on to work for our farmers.
The call to the honourable member for Mallee.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. Does the minister count detached granny flats towards Labor's housing targets? And if so, why won't Labor allow Australians who build them to access negative gearing? Isn't this just another example of Labor making up the rules as it goes, with toxic taxes that will mean fewer homes and higher rents?
Give the call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thanks so much, Speaker. If I just start with the why, we're a pro-supply government. We've got a challenge facing our country because for 40 years we haven't been building enough homes, and that's why we're building a better housing system, including the government building homes, something that was not done at all when those opposite were in office. Now, I'm asked about, Speaker, the definition under the legislation of what is a new build. That is how the legislation works. I'll take the member to the budget papers. They're very clear on what does and doesn't satisfy the definition. Page 6 of the relevant. I don't know what the interjection is. I'm answering the exact question I was asked. Speaker.
Order. Yeah. The minister was asked a question at the budget. She's referring to budget papers. I just ask everyone just to calm down and just listen. If she's getting an answer, the member will want to hear the answer as well. The Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. I take you to page 6 of the relevant budget fact sheet, which gives very clear examples of what is and isn't a new build. A newly constructed apartment off the plan is a new build. A duplex constructed through a knockdown rebuild, replacing a single freestanding house, is a new build. A residential construction on previously vacant land is a new build. It's also very clear about what doesn't meet the threshold. An established property recently extended, a freestanding house constructed through a knockdown rebuild replacing an older, smaller freestanding house, a granny flat built adjacent to an established property that isn't eligible for negative gearing. And I could go on, Speaker. It's actually in the budget papers, which hopefully those opposite have managed to familiarise themselves with.
No, resume. Just pause for a moment. The minister's referring to budget papers for a direct question she was asked, and everyone is just yelling and screaming. You can't have it both ways. If you ask a specific question and the minister is giving specific answers to the member who was entitled to ask her question, and you don't like that answer, look, everyone's just got to show some more restraint. I hope I've made myself clear. The Minister in continuation.
Thank you, Speaker. Now, I'm respectful of the member opposite who's asked this question and the question that she has brought before the parliament, but I think it is also fairly obvious to all of us the politics that is being played here. Those opposite are doing everything that they can to engage in the deep meaning of what our parliament has done this morning, and that is take a broken housing system.
The minister will pause. The member for Maranoa is on a warning. He'll leave the chamber under 94A. The member for Casey and the member for Moncrieff. The member for Casey and Moncrieff are also on warnings. The minister has 1 minute remaining.
Thank you so much, Speaker. The bill that the lower house passed this morning is about something really important, not just to the people I represent, not just to the people that we represent, but to the people that those opposite represent in parliament, Speaker. And instead of coming into this parliament and engaging in the new opportunities that we are opening up for first home buyers around this country, they are trying to engage with everything but that. Now, Speaker, they can play political parlour games. I've been in opposition. It's very frustrating. I understand. But I can tell the Australian people, no matter what they say opposite, we will not be deterred from the task that is in front of us. And that is a housing market that has been breaking slowly but surely over a 40-year period. Now, we have got home ownership rates around this country falling through the floor, and yet those opposite will not come into the parliament and properly engage on what to do about it. Well, Speaker, we are proud of the bill that has passed the parliament this morning. Not just a level playing field for first home buyers, but 75,000 rental households into a home of their own, and that's the opportunity they deserve.
Give a call to the honourable member for Deakin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How has the Albanese Labor government helped to ensure Australia's fuel security, and what policies will ensure fuel security into the future, and what policies would leave Australia more vulnerable to fuel shocks?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question and for his work in the House. And I'm happy to tell the honourable member and the House that we currently have 48 days' worth of petrol in Australia, Mr Speaker. On the day that Iran was bombed, we had 36 days. So we have increased the supply of petrol by 12 days. We have 36 days' worth of diesel and 30 days' worth of jet fuel, which are both more than we had on the day Iran was bombed. In fact, Mr Speaker, as we speak, across all fuel types, we have 6.2 billion litres, which is just under 1 billion litres more than when Iran was first bombed, Mr Speaker. This has been achieved by the government, working closely with industry, working with our trading partners in South East Asia through the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, working closely, Mr Speaker, across the board. And part of that work to ensure fuel supply and fuel security has been to provide factual, calm updates to the Australian people on a regular basis about our fuel situation. Now, the honourable member asked me what policies would hurt that. Well, policies which didn't involve that calm, factual update to the Australian people would do that. And the approach taken by all honourable members has not been the same as the government. So, for example, my shadow minister, the member for Wannon, said on the 19th of March, the deep concern we have now is that early April, mid-April, that's when we are likely to be looking at shortages, Mr Speaker. This concerning the Australian people. On the 25th of March, he said, towards the end of April, we are likely to be looking at serious shortages, Mr Speaker. Not to be outdone, April having been and gone with no shortages and no rationing, just a couple of weeks ago on the 20th of April, he moved on and said, my deep concern is what it looks like for us in June. Mr Speaker, moving on, no shortages, just putting the goalposts out further. I now rely on the member for Deakin to ask me a serious question about fuel supply, because when the news is good, the opposition is not interested, Mr Speaker. They are not patriots, they are partisans, Mr Speaker, more interested in point scoring than constructive engagement. Now, Mr Speaker, our approach is to continue to work on fuel supply with our trading partners and to build in the budget a strategic reserve of fuel owned by the Australian people, for the Australian people, that is opposed by those opposite. Also, we believe it's important to give Australians choices to diversify their transport so they can use electric vehicles and battery electric vehicles, Mr Speaker, because every 100,000 EVs in Australia avoids 3 days' worth of petrol use and diesel use. Now, we are pleased that, for example, yesterday the sales figures showed 30% of cars sold in May were electric or plug-in hybrid, Mr Speaker. This is huge and supported by the new vehicle efficiency standards they would abolish, by the electric vehicle tax cut they would abolish, and in many cases, Mr Speaker, those EVs will be powered by home batteries, 426,973 of them, which they would abolish.
Give a call to the honourable member for Curtin.
My question's for the Minister for Communications. It took 15 years to act on social media's harm to children. Parents are now worried about a new threat, attachment hacking. Children are increasingly spending their formative years talking to AI chatbots that simulate emotional intimacy, which can cause deep psychological harm and erode critical thinking. Will this be covered by the proposed digital duty of care, or will the government extend its under-16 social media ban to sycophantic AI chatbots and companion apps?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for her question and for her ongoing interest and commitment to advocating in this really important space. Australian parents are understandably worried about the rise of AI and what it means for their kids and in particular for their teenagers. And chatbots and Notify apps are just never things that we had to deal with when we were growing up. Right now, all digital platforms, and that includes AI chatbots, must protect young Australians from online harm. And if they don't, they face a fine of up to $49.5 million from the Safety Commissioner. Now, on top of that, we are restricting AI Notify apps and Notify tools because there is absolutely no place for these abhorrent tools in Australia, and I hope we can all agree with that. Now, we have already seen one chatbot provider leave the country since we did this because of the high bar that we have set. The digital duty of care builds on our world-leading online safety work to minimise online harms and to hold big tech accountable. Last year, we delayed access to social media, as you mentioned, until the age of 16, with 5 million accounts deactivated so far. We've quadrupled the eSafety Commissioner's funding to ensure that they can enforce the law and to help Australians who face serious abuse online. Now, the social media minimum age law deals with really specific harms that come from social media. Four in particular, the big four: there's algorithms, disappearing messages, popularity metrics, and endless feeds. Chatbots aren't social media. They're really anti-social media in that there's nothing social about them. So we're creating the minimum age for social media, and then the next step is legislating the digital duty of care. And under the digital duty of care, AI chatbots will have to adopt safety by design in principles in how they develop their tools from the start. And they will have to continue to have systems in place to protect young Australians from harm. So the short answer to your question is yes. If big tech companies want to do business in Australia, they will have to abide by our world-leading online safety laws.
With a call to the member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering for workers, and what are the threats to this progress?
Give a call to the Minister for Employment, the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Adelaide for his question and his ongoing advocacy for Australian workers. Now, of course, this Labor government is absolutely committed to supporting Australian workers, and we have introduced significant reforms to get wages moving. Our government introduced same job, same pay laws so that workers' wages would not be undercut by labour hire. And because of these laws, more than 8,000 workers are receiving pay rises that they deserve for the work that they do. Now, this government has also introduced new standards that ensure gig workers don't have to rely on tips to survive. The Albanese government has reinvigorated enterprise bargaining that have seen millions of workers get decent pay increases. And we've legislated to protect penalty rates and overtime rates in the modern award safety net, ensuring that these workers' pay packets would not go backwards. And of course, we've advocated for a wage increase to the minimum award wages each and every year that we have been in government. And just this week, we saw the Fair Work Commission hand down its decision, delivering a 4.75% wage increase for modern award-reliant workers, and of course, importantly, a 6% boost to the national minimum wage. Now, this means that the minimum wage has increased by 30% since we came to office. Now, of course, this government is not only backing workers by getting wages moving, we're also backing them with a fairer tax system. The combination of our government's tax cuts in the budget means the average worker will benefit by up to $2,800 a year. Now, of course, Mr Speaker, I am asked about whether there are any threats to this progress, and of course there is. Not only did those on the opposite side vote against every single measure we brought into this parliament to get wages moving, But of course, we all remember on the eve of the last election when they came in here and voted against tax cuts for workers. And of course, they then took that policy to an election, saying that they wanted to increase taxes for those workers.
Order.
Well, they never learned anything. They came into this parliament today and they voted again against tax cuts for workers. They will not learn anything. But of course, it's only this Labor government that will stand up for workers, fight for their wages and reduce their taxes.
Give the call to the member for Bowman.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Housing. Can the minister confirm the Albanese Labor government has acted as a guarantor for 51,000 non-citizens to buy their first home?
Give the call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Speaker, the 5% deposit program is a program our government is incredibly proud of. 250,000 people around this country have the keys to their first home because our government backed in their aspiration. Now, Speaker, the member opposite asks about the role of migrants in this. Let me be really clear. Temporary migrants to Australia are not eligible for this program.
Right.
I just want to be really clear for the parliament about who is eligible. Australian citizens and permanent residents of our country. Now, I don't want to be personal about the honourable member opposite, Speaker, because I understand how Tactics Committee work and I understand how that piece of paper ended up in his hands. But I just want to be really clear for Australians. Permanent residents are not the cause of the challenges facing our country on housing. And any attempt to assert that they are is wrong. Those opposite can continue racing to the bottom against One Nation, but I'll tell you what, you can't out One Nation, One Nation. You're never going to be Pauline Hanson. I think it's time that you accept it.
Order. The minister will pause. The member for Bowman.
Just on relevance, Speaker, we weren't asking for a commentary around opposition political parties. We're asking for a yes or no. Is that figure correct?
The minister was asked the question about the guarantee for 51,000. Okay, now that we've finished, the minister was asked the question about the home guarantee for 51,000 non-citizens and was that figure accurate. She has been absolutely directly relevant in talking about who is eligible. She did specify, and I think it's for every member to know, she said she went through the categories of who's eligible and who's not and the type of person eligible. So she's answering your question and being directly relevant. So I'll just ask her to return to the question, but I'm giving the minister a fair go and giving the member for Bowman a fair go as well.
Thank you, Speaker. And I think we've clarified here that the people that the member opposite is talking about are permanent residents of our country. So let me say again that those opposite can point the finger and blame the problems facing our country on permanent residents. That is not the position of those of us on this side of the chamber. What we see is communities of people, many of whom who have lived in our country for decades, who have paid into our healthcare system, who have paid into our aged care system. And you know who's got the problem here? It's those opposite who want to take away the ability for these people to live as they should in our country, Speaker. And I want people to understand, especially our loved Chinese communities, our loved Indian communities around Australia, that what those opposite are talking about is a group of people who might have lived here for 30 years and they are saying that they should not be eligible for aged care in our country. And, Speaker, I want to just say one more thing and then I'm going to come back to housing. Those opposite need to learn that what's heard in this chamber is not just heard in the electorate of Farrer, it's heard in the electorate of Chisholm, it's heard in the electorate of Hotham, it's heard in the electorate of Reid. And I'd encourage them to be honest with the Australian people about where the challenges facing our country come from.
Order. We're just going to stop the yelling while the minister's on her feet. Order. Order. The Leader of the Opposition, this non-stop commentary, it is not helpful to the chamber. The Minister has 10 seconds.
Speaker, this is nothing but an embarrassing shroud for the fact that those opposite have not a single sensible thing to say about housing policy in our country, but it won't hold us back from providing more opportunity to the people we came here to represent.
Give the call to Member for Moreton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. How is the Albanese Labor government strengthening safety in early childhood education and care?
Give the call to the Minister for Education.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the mellifluous member for Moreton, for her question. Also known as the best singer in the Australian Parliament, I'm informed as well.
Order.
Mr Speaker, there is nothing more important than the safety of our children. And over the last year I've been very blunt that not enough has been done by governments, whether it's Labor governments or Liberal governments or state or federal governments, to keep our children safe in early education and care. And a lot has happened in the last 12 months. Personal mobile phones are now banned in every centre across the country. CCTV is now being trialled in centres across the country. The Attorney-General is working with states and territories to strengthen working with children checks. A national register of every childcare worker is now up and running, and mandatory child safety training is now rolling out. And every childcare worker across the country has 6 months to do that training. And I can inform the House that after 3 months, 90% of childcare workers have already done that training. And that's a good sign. Our childcare workers, our educators, our teachers are the best asset that we've got to keep our kids safe. And they are just as hurt, just as angry, just as sickened, just as broken as the rest of us by the revelations from last year. And the fact that 90% have done that training within 3 months, I think, shows how seriously they're taking this. And it's not the end. It's just the start. The next tranche of safety training rolls out in August. Mr Speaker, I can also inform you that the legislation that we passed through this place last year is being used and it's working. This is the legislation that gives us the power to cut funding off to centres that aren't up to scratch. And I can inform the House now that 6 centres have shut, that 44 centres have suddenly fixed the safety and quality problems at those centres that exist for years but had refused to act to fix until this legislation was passed, and that others have now hit the deadline and, if they haven't hit the standard, have been issued with notices of intent by my department to suspend or to cancel their funding. I can also advise the House of more encouraging information. The percentage of childcare centres meeting the national quality and safety standards is now at the highest level ever, and the number of inspections by state regulators of childcare centres in the last 12 months is the highest it's ever been. And this is a good sign. It's an indication that things are changing for the better. But we're not done yet. There is a lot more work that needs to be done. The truth is that this work will never be fully completed. And I'll have more to say on that in the next few weeks.
Give the call to the honourable member for Farrer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Defence. Secure and reliable water resources are fundamental to Australia's food security and our national defence capability. Has the Department of Defence provided any formal input into the review of the 2007 Water Act, the 2026 Murray-Darling Basin Plan Review, and contributed to the development of the Australian National Food Security Strategy? And does the Minister consider water security a core defence capability for this nation?
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
Well, I thank the member for his inaugural question, and it is a very good question in terms of looking at those aspects of our nation which go to our national resilience, such as water security, seen through the lens of our national defence. The Defence Strategic Review that was handed down by the government in 2023, or released by the government in 2023, made clear that what we must do, in a way that we have really not done since the end of the Second World War, is to look at the connection between our civil economy and our national security, to look at ways in which those elements which go to our national resilience contribute to our national security. And the point that you are making, I should say the point that the honourable member is making, is a good one, in the sense that in any given scenario or contingency, water security, food security, how our civil economy works in the context of that contingency is completely fundamental to whether or not we are able to make our way through that contingency. Now, to go back to the Second World War, this was an idea which was deeply understood, but the Defence Strategic Review made it clear that we really need to be exercising those national muscles again in terms of thinking about the future. And so that does go to the question of thinking about about water security in the context of our national security as it does in relation to food security. It is about, in a sense, thinking about defence as a whole-of-government effort. And again, that is an idea which is repeated in the National Defence Strategy that we released a month ago. We continue to work with all the departments and all the agencies around our government to look at the way in which they contribute to national defence, and that includes the departments responsible for water security.
The call to the honourable member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering more bulk billing for Australians after a decade of cuts and neglect?
The call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. It is hard to find someone in this place who works harder than the member for Bendigo to ensure that her community gets the fullest benefit of our investments in a stronger Medicare. She campaigned for a Medicare urgent care clinic that has already seen 20,000 people in Bendigo, every single one of whom was fully bulk billed. The year before that, an endometriosis and pelvic pain clinic was opened in Bendigo, which has expanded and improved care options for women in that region. The long-standing Bendigo Headspace will soon be upgraded to a Headspace Plus service so it can expand the range and the number of young people it can support. And, Mr Speaker, people in Bendigo have already filled 3 million cheaper medicine scripts because of our policies, including an additional 750,000 scripts that were completely free of charge. These investments are making a real difference, Mr Speaker, not just in Bendigo but across regional Australia. And the biggest difference is in bulk billing. As the member said, bulk billing was in freefall when we came to government because of a decade of cuts to Medicare, and that is why we tripled the bulk billing incentive paid to GPs in 2023 for pensioners and concession card holders. And it's why last November we extended bulk billing incentives for the first time ever to all Australians. And, Mr Speaker, those incentives paid to GPs are much higher in regional Australia than in the major cities, 50% higher, for example, in a city like Bendigo. So I'm delighted to say that our bulk billing investments, backed in so hard by the member for Bendigo, have utterly transformed bulk billing in her community. Before November, only 2 out of every 10 general practices in Bendigo were fully bulk billing. That's now 7 in 10, from 2 in 10 to 7 in 10 in just a few months. The general bulk billing rate in Bendigo is up more than 21% since our first investments in 2023, from 68% to 89%, Mr Speaker. And for people who don't have that benefit of a concession card, the increase in bulk billing in Bendigo has been more than 30% thanks to our investment. Now, More bulk billing and cheaper medicines at a time of real cost of living pressure, Mr Speaker, is obviously good for the hip pocket. It's obviously good for household budgets, but it also means that more people in Bendigo are going to the doctor and filling their scripts when they need to rather than when they feel they can afford to. And that is building a healthier Bendigo and a healthier Australia.
Call to the honourable member for Dawson.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday, in a rare moment of honesty from the Albanese Labor government, the member for Ford confirmed Australians are worse off after 4 years of Labor, confirming, and I quote, "Living standards have gone backwards in this country." When will the Prime Minister show the same honesty and admit that his economic strategy has failed all Australians?
Order. The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for his question. And our budget was aimed clearly at providing tax cuts for people, together with the wage increase that happened at the beginning of this week. That is how you lift living standards, by people being paid more and keeping more of what they earn.
Order.
In addition to that, we are making a difference for people already through the housing policies that we've put forward. And indeed, just on last weekend, in the electorate of Dixon, Kathleen, a 65-year-old single mum from Arana Hills, who spent a year looking for a home and has been outbid time and time again. This is what she said. "It was really depressing to see a house you had your heart set on sell way over budget, only to reappear weeks later on the rental market. But last weekend, she finally got into her own home." In Ballarat North, Mark Williams, an auctioneer, spoke about an auction at a Ballarat North home that drew more than 50 people to the auction last weekend, but not one investor put their hand up. Mark Williams, the auctioneer, said this: "All the interested parties were owner-occupiers. The home was sold to a first home buyer in his 30s.
I'm not. Order. The Prime Minister reports. I'm not taking the member's point of order. Resume your seat. The question was barely within order. You're reflecting on a member pretty grievously, so resume your seat. By calling someone a rare moment of honesty, it's a deep reflection on members, which is unparliamentary. I allowed the question. Order. Reflecting on members is unparliamentary. Order. The Prime Minister will continue.
Thanks,
it was a broad question.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. They're against first home buyers. But I'll continue to give some examples. In Newcastle, in Tighe Hill,
Order. The Prime Minister will return to the question.
The listing agent, said this: "We had a first home buyer, a young family and a young couple bidding on it, and it went to the first home buyer." In Geelong it happened as well. Adam Notanuski, the selling agent, said this: "The first home buyer did win it by a nice edge at the end. They just threw an extra $500 on top and were the eventual purchasers." Guess what? If they were bidding versus an investor, the investor would know that they could go more than $500 more because they'd have a taxpayer on site. That is the difference that it makes, the difference that we are already making to people getting an opportunity in life, an opportunity in life. The quote, of course, always worry about what they actually say, because the member for Ford that I was asked about, his question was about the Liberals closing of the car industry. That is what his comment was about, because those opposite are against jobs, they're against living standards being improved, and they're against first home buyers.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Macon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services. How will the Albanese Labor government's new tax reform package help more Australians achieve the dream of home ownership for future generations, and are there any impediments to this?
The call to the Assistant Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services.
I thank the honourable member for the question. He has been a long-standing champion for more investment in housing and better outcomes for housing, particularly for young people. This government believes that if they work hard, all Australians should be able to save for and ultimately buy their own home. As former Liberal Prime Minister Robert Menzies clearly put it, a home provides one little piece of earth with a house and a garden which is ours, to which we can withdraw, in which we can be among friends, into which no stranger may come against our will. Unfortunately, the tax system as it stands is not working for young people, and too many young Australians are locked out. I think it's fair to say that for today's Liberals, young people truly are the forgotten Australians. I don't want to live in a country where our children can't afford to buy a home, and I know that the overwhelming number of Australians don't want to either. That's why the legislation that passed through the House today is so important. It tilts the tax system back in favour of young people, because when a first-home buyer bids for a home, they shouldn't be bidding against an investor who is backed by the entire Australian tax system. We've placed changes to negative gearing and capital gains at the centre of this budget. We are abolishing negative gearing for established properties and replacing the 50% capital gains exemption on nominal with taxing real gains, the original design of the system. Because we know that government should not provide more support to someone buying their second or third or fifth house than someone buying their first. Treasury modelling suggests these changes will result in a shift in ownership from investors to owner-occupiers. Our changes will support around 75,000 Australians into home ownership over the next decade. And we can see that this is already working. First-home buyers and owner-occupiers are already getting a leg up. Those on the other side of the chamber are the only people who seem to realise there's a problem. They want to keep the disastrous Howard Costello changes of 1999. These changes created deep structural flaws in our housing system that shut too many Australian families out of the market. When these changes were made, the cost of a house was roughly 4 times the average household income. It is now closer to 8, and it's time to act. As a result, the rates of home ownership of young people has plummeted. We're fixing the mistakes of the past. Those opposite can't let them go. The Liberal Party are the problem when it comes to unaffordable housing. They created the problem and now they defend it. I encourage them, for once, put aside the confected outrage, put the interests of Australians first and do the right thing. Support our budget and help Australians, help thousands of Australians to realise the dream of owning their own home.
Give the call to the honourable member for Warringah.
To the Prime Minister. Following on from the member for Wentworth's question on Tuesday and the very vague answer received from the minister, to be very clear, will the government be true to the Murphy report and ban all inducements in gambling and gambling advertising to protect Australians from the predatory gambling industry?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I refer to the minister's answer of this week, and I refer also to the measures that we've put before the Australian people. I went to the National Press Club and announced what our policies were, and I note that people then, when we came back into Parliament, said that somehow that was hidden. It's a strange way to hide it, going to the National Press Club. That's what being accountable is all about. We're taking action. We're taking action. We're taking action when it comes to problem gambling, more than any government in Australian history has. And the next comprehensive level of reforms will continue to engage, and I'll continue to engage with people on the crossbenches and across the parliament, as we have.
Give the call to the honourable member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering real change for Australians? Is there anything standing in the way?
Give the call to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, and I thank the member from Macquarie for her question. And indeed, this has been a fortnight where the Labor government is once again delivering real change. real change in the interests of Australians, identifying issues which are there and then coming up with real solutions to deal with them. Whether it is strengthening Medicare after the decade of undermining from those opposite. And this Sunday I will have the opportunity to open in Queensland the 137th Medicare Urgent Care Clinic. Those opposite called them a sugar hit. They opposed them. We've got 137 after this weekend, all up and running.
Members on my left.
We've delivered cheaper medicines, the lowest price since 2004. We've delivered as well the largest ever increase over the period of time that we have of bulk billing right across the nation. On free TAFE, we're now up well above 750,000 free TAFE places, which those opposite say is a waste. We backed and we saw this week the 5th consecutive increase in the minimum wage. So that those battlers out there who need the minimum wage to be increased will get it.
The Prime Minister will pause. The member for Moncrieff is on a warning. She's been yelling non-stop through this answer, so there are consequences for actions. She'll leave the chamber under 94A. Doesn't matter what time of question time it is. If you're interjecting and you're on a warning, trust me, I will hear it. The manager. The Prime Minister is going to continue with his answer.
They yell loudly when you speak about workers on the minimum wage getting a 4.75% increase. Workers have received over $12,000, those people on the minimum wage, since we came to office. Over a 12% real wage increase for Australia's lowest paid workers. Those opposite said low wages were a key feature of their economic architecture. We've delivered 5 income tax cuts. Those opposite have opposed all of them, and they did it again today. But there's nowhere where it's more exemplified the difference between the two sides of this chamber than with our $47 billion Homes for Australia plan. We have a plan of reform, the large tax reform, to take account of the fact that young people are simply being priced out of the housing market, to give them a fair crack at owning their own home. Those opposite want to abolish the HAF, abolish Help to Buy, reintroduce tax incentives for property investors rather than homeowners. Mr. Speaker, we on this side stand for delivering real change. Those opposite are just defined by what they are against. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.